Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today all the way from Iowa by Scott Jarvis, soft G like giraffe. Coach, thanks for being on.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you letting me be on.
Well, take us through the journey, Coach. How did we end up in the seat you're in and juggling all the balls that you proverbially keep in air?
I know, Coach, it's kind of probably a little bit different journey. Maybe not. I was going to school and my whole intent was to be a lawyer. So I got my degree in political science, went to Westmar University and NAI school. And I got done and my coach was like, hey, you should stay and kind of be a GA for us. I'm like, well, gosh, Coach, I got, took my GMATs and ready to go to law school. And I'm like, oh, you can stay and, it'll be fun. I'm like, oh, that will be fun. And so here I am 30 years later, still in the game and love it. I just love, and I even from a small kid, I love sports. I was the kid, and I'm going to date myself here with the old Nintendo. We had, every type of sports tournament on Nintendo you could play. So football, basketball, hockey, and I was drawing up the brackets and we were having tournaments with 34 kids, from the neighborhood coming over and playing a tournament. We actually set up our TV and everything in the garage because my mom's like, get out of the house. You guys are driving me absolutely crazy, but have had a great career. Coached college football for 4 years. And then I got into high school coaching, high school football coach at a really small school up in Northeast Iowa, MFL Marmac, and ended up being the athletic director and head football coach there. And then went on to Muscatine, a school of about 1,600 students. I was the athletic director there. And, my dream or my goal was always to become a college AD. But as I got into the high school and just fell in love with working with the coaches and kids, stayed. And, again, here I am still, again, 27, almost 30 years later now. High school sports and love working with our coaches and kids, and love every minute of it. As always for coaches, there's some stuff we don't like, but the kids and the coaches make it all worth it.
And so now you're at Newton as the athletic coordinator. How do we jump from Muscatine to Newton?
So I went from, actually there's a couple stops in there, but I went from Muscatine to Burnsville Egan Savage School District. I was a district athletic director up there. Then went to Eastside Catholic in Seattle, Washington, and came to Newton. 2012, was the athletic director there until 2018. Then I was athletic director at Ankeny Centennial High School, and now I'm back at Newton as athletic coordinator. So, Coach, I've been all over the country. They keep kicking me out of states, and I just keep coming back.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, it's a pretty big jump to go from Iowa to Seattle and back. But share a little bit just for my own knowledge. You were the athletic director at Newton, and now you're the athletic coordinator in this second visit. What's the difference?
Well, I get to point the finger at the big guy now. I go, you want to complain? Go to that guy. I tell everybody all the time, I get to do all the fun stuff. I get to, supervise, coaches do fundraising. I get to do all the stuff that I love to do. And I don't have to deal with the craziness that we all always sometimes don't always like.
Got it.
It's kind of the perfect
essentially
role.
You're the assistant AD.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Perfect. Got it. That's helpful. So then what I usually ask is, right, what did you realize right away you need to figure out when you got into whatever new job it was? So be it a football coach, be it the athletic director, be it the district athletic director. What I'd love for you to talk about, given your background, is the differences between district level admin, site level admin, right? Similarities as well, but just what does that comparison look like?
So I would tell you from the district level, I always tell everybody it's more policy, procedure, systems kind of thought. And then working directly with the athletic directors that you'd have at your separate buildings. Still many of the same things. So I always tell ADs at a site AD, you're the coaches of coaches. I feel like in a district AD position, you're the coach of ADs.
Okay.
But obviously still, when I was at Burnsville, I had 3 other ADs I worked with within the district. And then I was at my own school also. So it was a little bit different. So working with them across district. And then, you know, when I was at Burnsville as a district AD role, I mean, I had, you know, coaches at 3, 4 different campuses, 5 different campuses, and working with our ADs in those campuses that I wasn't directly in charge of. So a little bit more oversight. But again, I was still in a position where I was still a site AD too. So I had a little bit of both. So I still get to live in both worlds a little bit. And I love that piece of it too, because I had the opportunity to connect with coaches and kids. And I would tell you, the further I get away from kids, I don't like that. So I always need to connect with kids. So I tell everybody all the time, one of the things I do love is working with our coaches and kids in professional development, student leadership. I love to do that stuff. So I still want to be a coach. Honestly, if you want to get down to it, Justin, I still want to be a coach.
Yeah, and I think we all have our foot in that to a certain degree, and it's just a matter of how much of our time is that consuming in any given year. I want to go back to what you said about the district level. It's more policies and procedures. Can you talk a little bit about how those are not always front of mind for us at the site level, especially as coaches? Can you share what you've learned over the 30 years of, here's why these are important. These are the things that I would say in 2024 need to be front of mind for you based on that experience.
So I would tell you that coaches always hate policies and procedures because it's always a roadblock typically. But I always call them the CYAs. These are the cover your ass, you know, policies and procedures. And I talk about it every year. And the coach is like, oh my God, not this same thing again. I'm like, but we got to talk about it every year to make sure that we're keeping ourselves out of trouble. And I tell coaches all the time, I am not trying to catch you doing something wrong. I'm trying to catch you doing something good. But a lot of times I feel like as athletic administrators, whether we're a site or a district AD, we're trying to avoid those pitfalls that our coaches can sometimes get into because that's not their focus. Their focus is on the kids, on winning, you know, games, whether it's football, basketball, soccer, you know, whatever that is, that's their focus. So I always tell them we got to take the blinders off a little bit. And we got to see a little bit wider scope when we look at those policies and procedures. And at the end of the day, that's our job as ADs, is to help our coaches, you know, kind of widen their focus a little bit for them to see it from a larger picture. And that's our job as ADs, to do that for our coaches, because we do want them to have blinders on in some regards, because we want them focusing on their programs and their kids.
No doubt. And what I run into often, and I discuss this with my assistants all the time, is my frustration with my coaches who are doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing, which is having tunnel vision on enhancing their program with complete and utter disregard for the rest of the department and the rest of the sports. And it's like, it's frustrating. And while I'm trying to get them to widen their lens and be like, look, when you do this, this is the impact it has on this other group, I'm also reminding myself, like, they're actually doing what they're supposed to and promoting their own program, right? And so I love that for those coaches that are listening. It's the PMPs are there to protect you. And the more knowledge you can have about them, the easier it is to hit away from trouble, right? So talk a little bit about that, right? We're probably the same age. We're going back 30 years. The things we did as coaches when we were 23, 24, we wouldn't think about doing them if you paid us money these days.
No.
But
I've been fired 20 times.
Yeah, but for me, it's more about my lens as an AD is my starting place is risk management now, rather than the last thing I'm thinking about back then. Dive into that a little bit and give us some stories and anecdotes about like how you figured out how to navigate that, how you teach that to your coaches, what coaches should be keeping front of mind to cover themselves in this day and age.
And so Justin, I'll start with this story, and you're probably like this too. If I go to an event now, I'm thinking about all the things that are screwed up and that could cause a problem. And it doesn't even matter what event. I was just at my niece's graduation, and I'm thinking like, oh, they should have a cop over there. Like my brain just doesn't even shut off. So, or if I'm going up a set of bleachers and the things wobbly, I'm like, oh gosh, I'd hate for some elderly person to walk up these stairs and try to grab this and it breaks off. Like, I always am thinking about that now. Completely different than when I was a coach. I was thinking about, okay, what plays are we running? How are we going to start this thing off? All preparation for the game. Never anything about. I always tell everybody as an AD, when you get the game started, you kind of breathe a sigh of relief. I'm like, now it's referees and coaches. That's on them now. But we always have issues we're running into during games too. Whether it's dealing with a crazy parent in the stands or somebody, doing something silly, or student sections saying something they shouldn't say. So I always tell people, ADs are on call 24/7, 365, and you're connected to your job every minute of every day.
Yep.
So when I go back and I start talking about, working with coaches and get them to kind of, open their, use their peripheral vision on some of these issues, is I would tell you that the biggest thing I've done for that has been our professional development and getting our coaches in the same room has been so important. And not even necessarily, Justin, because that we're learning about other things other than the X's and O's, because we always focus that really on leadership, but the opportunities for our coaches to be in the same room and understand that we all have the same problems, that we're dealing with the same parent issues, and they have the ability to talk. And literally now, coach, it's like sit back, and as a facilitator, we might be talking about building trust. And that means building trust amongst our team, within our coaching staff, within our school. How can we do that? And we're talking about those all the time. I tell you, that's a game changer for me with our climate and culture, with our coaches, and getting them to see beyond their own program is spending time with the other coaches. And I was just on our podcast yesterday, and we talked about, building we had Coach Finn on from Roland Story High School, and he talked about the rule of three. He talked about, how important developing trust is. And through that trust, we have to be competent. We need to know the X's and O's, but we got to create connection with kids. Just like as an AD, we got to create connection with coaches. And we do not do that without investing time in each and one of our coaches, whether it's one-on-one meetings, whether it's going out and watching practice, whether it's having time to evaluate our coaches. We cannot do that without investing time in our coaches, investing time in our student athletes. And I know it's tough to do as an AD, to spend, because we get into that management role all the time, and we sometimes lose sight of like, we need to lead our coaches and we need to lead our programs too.
Yeah, no, there's a lot there to unpack. And I think the piece you just shared on getting everybody in the room is something that I struggle with in regards to the number of off-campus coaches I have, the demand on their time. When do you make that available without overstretching them? But at the same time, name that, and the benefit that comes from that goes well beyond not doing it, right? And to your other point, it's funny, I just got back from a camp with my son. I was an observing coach, and the entire time as a basketball coach, I'm like, don't stand on the baseline, tyrant. You're behind the paint area, because I don't want someone breaking an ankle. And at camp, everything they're doing, these kids are like on the edge of the court, stepping on early. There's games going on. I'm just sitting here like, dude, step back, please step back. And
I don't want anybody to break their ankle.
No, and it's wild. And it's one of those things where I joke that I stopped having fun as a coach when I started thinking about all the things that can go sideways. And I got to remind myself that, like, hey, it's okay, you can still have fun. Like, put that out of sight, right? Or my office is right by the pool, and the lower school had their end of year field day, and they were doing like boat races in the pool. And I'm sitting here watching them like jump off of the deck onto these boats, just waiting for someone to crack their head open. And I'm like, oh my God, this is bad. But anyway, so that's, try to avoid that, coaches, until you can't anymore. AD, you know what we're talking about.
And every AD listening right now is just picturing something that's happened, like, oh God, please don't. Please don't.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. All right, let me ask this. So
Yeah.
you're a football guy primarily, it sounds like. What other
Yeah.
sports have you coached? What have you learned
Yep.
that you've been able to apply and or share with your coaches from other sports that aren't the primary discipline?
So yeah, I've coached track and field, football, basketball, wrestling, um, baseball, and I actually last year we could not find an eighth grade girls basketball coach. So I coached eighth grade girls basketball, and I was like, I'm never gonna coach, middle school sports in my life. Never gonna coach, and especially girls middle school sports. And I coached it last year. And I will tell you that it was like the most fun coaching experience I ever had, which sounds absolutely crazy because I was like, and it sounds nuts. I'm like, I was deathly afraid of doing it. I was like, oh my God. I was just, and the one thing that it really kind of brought out of me is like how important it is for us as coaches to communicate with parents, even though we absolutely don't want to do that. And it's not even about, the communications, like talking about the good things that we see in practice every day. So I got in the habit of every day, our kids at the end of practice. And I tell you, like, I feel like I'm a much better coach now that I've been in AD because I see, and then you just said it, like you think about all the bad things that could happen. And I still do think about that, but it was about being present in the moment and helping those kids, those girls get better at basketball.
Yeah.
And we were not great. We were not very good.
Right.
We ended up winning 3 games, and the year before they won 0.
Yep.
And so they were so excited about winning a game. It was like we won the Super Bowl. And I'll tell you, the last game of the season, we won, and a girl who hadn't scored a bucket all year made the game-winning shot. I was more happy that moment than I was winning a state championship. It was because I just let myself be in that moment and be, and I was so proud of the girls because they worked hard and we did a lot of good things throughout the year. And I knew for some of those girls, it was going to be the last time they ever played that sport. And how important it was for them to have fun.
Yeah.
And that communication with the parents was so pivotal in that. Just sending out good things about calling parents like, hey, I just want to let you know your daughter is just, and I know she's not playing a lot, but she is working her tail off and she's making us better in practice. I'm going to tell you what, the first opportunity I get to get her in the game, I'm going to, because she's improved so much. And just those little conversations that I spent, and they're a minute, 2 minutes, made such a huge impact on the climate and culture, because you know how they can get away from you.
Oh, absolutely.
Parents can go rogue on you real quick. So that was one thing I was like, it's the only time I've ever coached that I didn't have a parent complaint. And
well,
I
there
think
you
it
go.
was
How do you apply that to all the other teams, right? And I think a big part of it, I truly believe this is your mindset at the middle school, and it's not even the level of the middle school, right? So I was the varsity boys basketball coach for 8 years, and I coached the middle school girls team at the same time for 8 years, purposefully to like keep sanity, because my approach with the middle schoolers was very different than my approach with the high schoolers, and I was always trying to come to that stasis of like, this is where you should be, right? Not at the 2 poles. And so I think part of that is not the lowered expectations, but the understanding that there's an aspect of development with it that supersedes the outcome-based focus that we usually have.
Yeah, and Coach, you made a great point there. And it's understanding that just like we do in school, like, and sometimes I think as coaches, we forget this. Just like in school, we've got, our vertical articulation of skill that we learn. Here's what we learned in 2nd grade. Here's what we learned in 3rd. Same with our basketball players. Because, coach basketball, like, here's the skills I want my 2nd grade kids to have developed as 2nd grade basketball players. So that was one thing I think too, that for coaches that has been beneficial in my role as an AD is like, okay, we're going to think about what you want 2nd grade to look like for kids. What do you want them to learn and know and understand, so that we've got that basis when they get to their freshman year in high school, they're going to have this base that we've helped develop with our youth program, whether it's through our traveling basketball, whether it's through your local YMCA, whatever that looks like. Make sure that as a head coach, I always talk to head coaches like, you are the expert K-12. And that means you're going to have to work with people that you might not want to work with. But whenever we have our interviews with coaches, we always talk to them like, how are you going to develop an athletic program K through 12?
Yep.
And for them to have that, I'm not just the varsity, and coach, you made a great point too. I'm not just the varsity basketball coach, because these kids, all of these kids are going to be mine at some point. So I need to start working with those kids. And I would tell you, like, when our coaches do that, they develop those relationships with parents from the time they're second, third grade, all the way up to varsity. You've got a level of trust there that's been developed over 10 years that if we're just focusing on our varsity kids, we will never have.
Yep. No doubt. No doubt. And it's one of those things where every situation's different, right? It sounds like in Iowa, there's a vertical integration between the schools going to one high school, right? We're out here, it's not always the same, but the idea of, at a minimum, your 9 through 12 program, right? Needs some vertical integration. Let me ask this, because you mentioned Seattle, which is obviously Washington, and then Iowa. And I don't know if there was a third state that I missed, but Minnesota. So out of curiosity, because I don't know any of those three states, what are some things that are different from the federation or association at the state level that they're different? What are some of the things that you wish you could take from each of them to enhance the experience of athletes, if you could kind of carve out the perfect world scenario of all of these different places?
So I would tell you that in Iowa, the thing that I like about Iowa is that our associations are their own entities. And I know in some of the other states I've been in, our state legislatures get probably too involved. And when politics get into athletics, you know, coach, it's just never good. And I see that happen across the country, and it's really too bad. But that does happen. So I say in Iowa, that has been something that I have appreciated, that our state legislature and we're a little different in Iowa too, because we've got a girls athletic union and an Iowa High School Athletic Association. So we've got a girls association that runs all of our girls sports and a boys association that runs all of our boys sports.
That's wild, by the way. That's fascinating in this day and age.
And we're the only state that does that. So very different than any place else I've been. Now, I will say over the probably past 10 years, 15 years, they have, like, we do a lot of like our co-ed state track meet, co-ed cross country. So we are starting to come together on some stuff, which has been a little bit easier on ADs because the girls union has a classification system, boys has a classification system. And then parents are like, why are we 4A in football here and we're 3A in basketball over here and 5A in football? And so answering those questions, especially for some of our people who've been in our community for a long time, is always difficult to explain. But having two associations, now I will say for our girls association, our girls get an absolutely amazing state tournament experience. And I would tell you probably all the flash and bang you could ever want at our girls state tournaments. Which is really awesome for and having two daughters and having a son go through athletics. It's awesome to see them. They get that type of experience at our state tournaments. Washington, I love the fact that we had, and this is in Minnesota and Washington, we actually worked with section leaders from our state associations that were kind of separate from the state association, but still linked. So I felt like we had a little bit more of a communication with our state association and directly with the athletic directors. I thought that was great. So in Minnesota, we had like region directors. Same in Seattle. I love that or in Washington. I love that about that because I felt like it provided our ADs a voice. And, you know, sometimes I feel sometimes like our ADs are the last persons I ask when it comes down to, you know, like football coaches are in the football, recommendation committee for the state association. But a lot of times the ADs aren't involved in that. And then we're expected to administer that, but never really have a voice in what that looks like. So I always appreciated that about Minnesota and Washington, that they had that direct connection. So, but then that comes with it too, you know, you're running your own region tournaments. So sometimes regions did things differently. So sometimes your path to the state tournament might be different than somebody else's, which always caused some, you know, issues. But I did like that as a communication piece to the
Yeah.
state associations in both of those organizations.
No, it's cool because you're always wondering, right? I'm a lifetime Californian, so it's just
Yep.
I've been in different sections. We have 10 different sections in the state, and they operate
Yeah.
differently because California is a federation and not an association.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's just always interesting what everybody else is dealing with. Now, what would you say after all of these different stops, right? And if I'm doing my
Yep.
math on them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Too
7,
many to count, Coach.
8 or 9 different
Yep.
stops. What would you say is the best thing that you do that you bring with you everywhere because it's that transformational, right? Obviously, you got to
Yep.
figure out the culture of the place you're at, but it's like, nope, we're doing this, period, never
Yep.
fail.
I would say always get to a school and come up and create a strategic plan for your department. Absolutely important, imperative to do that. Now that means that you have to be there long enough to learn the history and learn the landscape and stuff. But I think that's something as ADs, for me, it's really framed what I've done and tried to accomplish at each school because I felt like we went through that process. And that included student athletes, coaches, alumni, administrators, and getting a lay of the land and then actually getting feedback from the people that we serve about here's what we want to look like. Mm-hmm. But knowing that it's going to be work. Mm-hmm. There's going to be stuff that we need to do. And it's always a journey and a process in everything that we do. And it's not always easy. And sometimes making the right choice isn't always the easiest choice. Mm-hmm. So that would be one. Secondly, I think it's professional development with my coaching staff and spending that time, investing time in the professional development with my coaches beyond the X's and O's has been imperative, important to me. And Coach, you just said it. It's how can we be transformational leaders within our departments? And that we don't do that unless we spend the time to, find out what we want to be about and then put plans in place to go out and do that. So for me, it's always been, whether you use 3D coaching or proactive coaching or whatever you use, having something that you can have a common language, have a framework with that all your coaches on the same page, and just the coaches in the room, spending time together is so valuable. And as an AD, I think everybody will appreciate this. When we were able to do that and get people in the room, and I'll tell you this, and Coach, you mentioned it. Well, it's tough to get all my coaches from outside. Just start doing it. Mm-hmm. Just start doing it. You might only get 5.
Right.
But as they're in there and as you go through whatever program you choose to use, whether you do something on your own, your coaches, you get buy-in from them because gosh, it was so nice to sit in the room with other coaches that are dealing, because I know, they say misery loves company, but when we're sitting in that room, we're coming up with solutions to solve those problems. Mm-hmm. And it's even gotten to a point now where coaches are actually leading those sessions. And that's been awesome. And I'll tell you, the first year we went through that in every school I've been in, we use 3D, whatever you use is awesome. But to see our coaches really start thinking about why they coach. And that's for a coach that's just started or been around for 30 years. Mm-hmm. Why do you coach? Having that transformational purpose statement, that why statement, whatever that looks like for you. And if you can go back to all the decisions you make and lead back to your why or your purpose, you're going to lay your head on it's going to be a little bit easier to make those decisions, even though a lot of them are tough. Thirdly is working directly with my student athletes, either within a leadership development program or a student athletic advisory council, getting feedback from student athletes, doing program assessments at the end of each year are 3 things that I think that no matter where I go, I've done because it's made such a huge impact. And at the end of the day, Coach, it's all about you've got time to develop relationships with kids, coaches, and parents.
Yeah. No, I think those are all great, especially the way you laid them out, right? So figure out, how do you have common language, right? How do you get your athletes together so that they have a voice, right? And how do you get a feel and get the people on board that are trying to come alongside of you as you are implementing change? So I think that's great. And it's like a snapshot of this entire episode. If you take that 5-minute chunk out, it's like, go apply that and you're going to be okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Let me ask this as a follow-up, and we'll close with this. This is
Yeah.
always something that I'm curious about from a growth
Yeah.
mindset standpoint, which is what's something you've most recently changed your mind on, right? I used to be pretty dug in over here, and you know, I'm over here now, and here's why.
Yep. Oh, coach, that's a great question, man. I would tell you, and this is just something that somebody asked me not too long ago. And you know, it's like those questions that stump you sometimes. And you're like, because I haven't thought about that. I would tell you that somebody asked me not too long ago, they go, how are you intentional? And I was like, oh shit. I had to think about it. And as I thought about it, I was like, it took me a little time to think about it. I was like, it honestly came down to, coach, it was my time. I have to be intentional with my time. So like, if you look at my calendar, I have everything in there.
Yeah.
My kids' games.
Yeah.
If I'm going to spend time with my mom, if I got to bring my mom to a doctor's appointment, we get old, you start having to take care of your parents, something I never thought I was going to have to do.
Yeah.
But all those, I put that all on my calendar because I want to invest time in, and if I'm going to do coaches professional development, I got to have time to put that together. If I'm going to do my student leadership, I got to have time to do that. And if I put it on my calendar, and then we all know shit comes up, you know, and we got to put out a fire. But if I got it on my calendar, I'm going to go make sure I invest that time in that to get that done. So I put on my calendar. And so I would tell you, and everybody, if I put it on my calendar, I'm investing that time in doing that. And that has been the way that I've been intentional with everything I do, because we're going to invest time in what we love to do. So I'm going to invest time in those things that I love to do, watching my kids, you know, spending time with family, and providing leadership to our student athletes and coaches, and giving us time to be together and build that trust and develop that culture and climate that we want for our kids and our coaches and our community.
No, that's great. And I was going to end there, but it prompted me with a different question, which is, what is the best tool that you have adopted and or been using for a while that makes your life easier? So for example, Calendly, which is how we scheduled this, right? For me, is something that I started using about
awesome tool
18 months ago. What's something else you could offer people?
So I've used Bound now for about 6 years to manage all my athletic stuff, and that's been a game changer for me. So everything in one spot, student registration, all of our communication with our parents, coaches, student athletes, rostering our athletes, doing our eligibility all in one spot has been the absolute best thing that I've done in a long time.
And it was called what?
Tons of time. It's called Bound.
BOUND.
Yep.
Okay.
Bound.
People, check that out. That might be a game changer for you.
Yep.
All right. Well, Coach, I appreciate you taking the time, jumping.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate what you do. And I tell people all the time, with any podcast that I'm on, or if it's my own, I learn something new every single time. And we talk about that growth mindset and how important it is for us to listen to podcasts or to read or whatever that is. Invest that time in yourself too.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's what I've told people in regards to this. It's like, this is a personal PhD in leadership over the last 3 years of just picking brains. Right. And it's applicable. So
yes, every time.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you.